Seconds.
There it is.
There we go. Okay. Now we're started. All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm calling this meeting of the Tier 3 Regionalization Working Group to order. It is 12:08 on July 7, 2025, and I'm Barbara Neal. We will be recording the meeting, and the recording will be posted to the task force webpage following the meeting. So working group people present, we see Jim Mack and Ron Kumitz, and of course, Rick and Dom and Elizabeth from Televate are here as well. And I see no members of the public that need to introduce themselves. So we will keep moving on. I have approval of the minutes, which we don't need this time because we haven't, this is the first meeting.
Exactly.
And I don't see it on this agenda, but it ought to be. I think we ought to be approving the agenda as well.
Okay.
So
I can edit that.
I will. I'll ask that we add approval of the agenda to this and future working group meetings, and then we'll ask if Jim or Mac, do you have, or Jim or Ron, do you have any changes for today's agenda?
No.
Okay.
I do not.
Okay, thank you, Ron. We'll consider it approved then, and I will move this right over to Dom for the first piece of the discussion on objectives.
Okay, thank you. And I have a presentation I'd like to share with the group, so I'll go into that. And let's see. Okay, I brought up PowerPoint. I'm probably going to go into some of this is small, so I probably need to go into presentation mode.
Before Dom gets started, may I lay a little kind of the procedure and process and raise a couple of comments up front? So this is our inaugural session for the Tier 3 Policy and Operations Based Regionalization Working Group, and so it's important that this is going to be an open discussion. There's a lot of content here, a lot of valuable content, but I want this to be an open discussion between you all. Dom and I will facilitate and process. In the beginning, we're going to go kind of here's what's in this effort, so that we'll be doing most of the talking up front, but this is really focused on your working group's development of preliminary recommendations for future presentation to the task force for their overall consideration. So decisions aren't being made at this level, but we're going to record your comments and opinions and priority thoughts regarding this tier. This is a very important for this tier's consideration. We don't yet know the future structure of regionalization of public safety communications in this state. So until that time, this working group has got to consider what the future landscape might be, and how that might impact what we discuss. Without knowing that, there might be some challenges. So one way around that is to consider, maybe have some discussion. If the regionalization structure is X, how does that impact the work we're doing? Or if it's Y, how does that impact? Importantly, since these are policy and operations based, that might not play into consideration as some of the other working groups, but it's important that we keep that in mind as we go through this effort, because your input, some of your ideas here might input and contribute to our consideration of regionalization, but importantly, it's going to be kind of overarching, regardless of how regionalization occurs in the state, based on the work of the working group and recommendations to the legislature. We want to keep that in mind. And I don't know, do you think that not knowing that is an impact on any of the work we're going to do today?
Well, we can review the items in just a minute. Certainly, I want to hear the opinion of others. My opinion is much of this, if not all of it, I think is somewhat independent of which way the regionalization discussion goes. I think a
Mhm.
lot of the decisions and recommendations made here would be applicable, no matter what the tier one outcome is.
Right.
I just keep that in
I would
mind.
agree.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I just want us all to keep that in mind. With that said, any other? I don't have any other opening comments other than we're going to capture action items and next steps throughout the meeting, and before we end and conclude, we'll go through them so that we know what our next steps are. Thank you, Don.
All right, thank you all. Let me again pull up the presentation, and again, kind of to echo Rick's comments. The goals and objectives here, as we see it, are to identify specific priorities in these individual areas that we're going to discuss in a minute, that can be provided to the task force as a whole, and for them to make specific recommendations. Just as a quick reminder as where we are, and this is a new schedule from what anyone else has seen, just updated. Oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to go into presentation mode, and there. And hopefully you can see that
Yep,
full screen.
looks good.
Okay, great. We have had some difficulty getting these meetings scheduled and moving forward, so we've had to delay some of those. We've tried to adjust this here to make it doable, yet not too overwhelming. The governance committee has not met yet. We are scheduled to meet this week, and you can see the tier three. This one here, the policy and operations based, we pushed that out a little bit, recognizing we're just starting a meeting now, to meet now, and the goal would be to have our priorities and initial potential recommendations to the task force by the middle of August. And to give us this is an overview of this particular section. This is section 3.2 of the system planning report, which I'm sure we have all reviewed and hopefully read in detail. This addresses policy and operations based regionalization, and it is termed as tier 3 per MCP's hierarchy and the recommendations that they've provided. So as I mentioned, the goal for the group is to determine priorities and potential initial recommendations in these areas that can be provided to the full task force. The items that are covered in this section are a number of them, fairly broad here, but they are grouped into three particular groups: support, operations, and workforce. And each of them has three particular items underneath them. And there are descriptions of those. And we'll see for each of these items, there's from the document, there were identified key trends and insights from the work that was done to put this information together, following all the interviews and the site visits that were done throughout the state. We have the key insights and trends, and then some recommendations, and there's potential options for each of these items. So I'd like to go through very quickly just the overall of all of these. Our recommendation is, our thoughts were for this first meeting focused on the first group, support. We feel that certainly addressing all three of them at once might be a bit overwhelming. So recommendation is to focus on support for this particular meeting. And as I mentioned, in each case, we have the key insights and trends. So that's the text you see in these slides. So this is the support portion. This one addresses support administrative roles. And again, we'll come back to these, but I'll go through each of these and apologize for the kind of different format in the slides, but that was done to try and fit all the pertinent criteria in the slide. Okay, this addresses GIS, and then I'm sorry, let me go back here. We missed one. Okay. We missed the QA. I'll have to go back in a second and try and capture that. Rick, did that somehow get deleted, that slide?
No, not that I know of, but yes, I'm looking at them saying, where did it go? Let me go see what happened to it.
Under operations, again, now this is the second group, and there were a number of key insights and trends that MCP determined from their investigation and summarized here. And then we have a slide for each of those three areas under operations: policies and procedures, which is a significant one, I'm sure, protocols, and then finally planning. The third group is the workforce group, and that addresses staffing, retention, etc. Again, here are the key insights and trends. And then we address each of those individual ones under workforce, which include recruiting and hiring, standardized training, and staffing.
Tom, you could start, actually, you should start at the beginning, because certain slides, that were somehow, they disappeared, and I put them back in.
Okay.
So you could you start at the agenda, I mean, it was in there, so.
Okay. Yeah, I was not seeing that
don't
when
know.
I first powered this up.
I'm
Okay.
not sure.
All right. Sorry for that little glitch here. Yes, we have the, well, just to confirm, we have the agenda, which, Barb kicked off for us. And we've already discussed this is Tier 3 under Section 3.2. And now we'd like to address the support. So specifically, under support, again, there's three items. I'll back up just a second. There's quality assurance / standardized QA, support and administrative roles, and GIS. So those are the three items we would like to address in this first meeting here. Under standardized QA, you'll see that the key insight that was determined through the site visits was that only 18 of the 37 comm centers reported having some sort of QA program. Among them, we have 2 centers reported having a formal standardized program, and 3 reported informal. 13 indicated QA activities only occurred in response to issues. So that's essentially where we stand today within Vermont. And the rest of the slide here in table format are 3 options recommended by MCP as to how to address those the current situation and to improve it. So you'll see option 1, option 2, option 3. Then in the table on the right-hand side, each of those has advantages that are listed there under the blue heading, and then challenges associated with them. So this is where we'd like to start and encourage some discussion. I'll also remind the team that, of course, their QA is done regarding the call handling portion of the 911 process. And that's something, Barb, that you oversee as part of your role, correct?
Yes. Yes, and our QA/QC program for several years has struggled a bit to move beyond a reactive program or monitoring. We monitor the new call takers a little bit more robustly than experienced ones, but we've just gotten approval to hire 2 part-time people to help with the QA effort. So we're going to make that transition to a more proactive QA stance, if you will. I don't know if this is the time to bring it up, but there is some language in the report that suggests that moving our QA/QC program, the program is there, the framework of what you do and how you do it and how we evaluate these calls and so forth for the 911 call taking piece. But the report suggests that it would be an easy lift to expand that to dispatch. And I know there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of moving parts here, but I don't agree with that. It's a heavy lift, and for resources, for one thing. And it feels a little bit like the cart before the horse thing, right? There's no standardized protocol and procedures on the dispatch side of the house like there is on the 911 side of the house. So when this came to be, I mean, you can't have a QA program if you don't have something to measure. So anyway, so those are just some of the concerns or red flags that popped up for me when I was reading that section, because they did kind of present it, at least in my reading, of like, this would be an easy thing to do. So anyway, that's my initial 2 cents.
Well, thank you for that. And that's so that's essentially what's described here as option 1.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, it says use the current QA process. They reference the specification that's it's an APCO NINA document, and it says expanded to service to review of calls received on 911 and radio dispatch.
Mhm.
So that's essentially what they're proposing.
Right.
Certainly understand your concern about a lack of common policies and procedures as well at dispatch, and that's one of the issues that this group will address as well, or will review, I should say, as well. And right now, we would anticipate subsequent meetings. Certainly, if it makes sense, we could adjust that approach. But right now, that is covered under one of the operations group of this particular task group.
Hey,
Right.
Tom, Jim has a comment.
Yeah, at this point, until we have some standardized policies and protocols, number one. Number two, even if 911, we wanted to have 911 do these reviews, the recording systems aren't set up for them to be able to easily access. It's not like there's one system out there.
Right.
So
That's
the
a really
hardware
good
side,
point.
the hardware side virtually makes it impossible for 911 to access.
I see.
So I think it would probably have to be, something that evolved over time with a statewide system. So if the state is going to provide this component of the system, let's say a CAD system, for example, and the task force has decided on what the call handling or the what's the word I want? The dispatch procedures need to be in place. Then we could do something. There's a system that is uniform throughout, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think we certainly want to look long term here and assume that there are going to be some improvements and additional common procedures and policies that are established. Maybe it's best to discuss what are the important aspects or what are the priorities that we want to address here under the QA section. Is it something is it important to have standardized QA? Would we all agree on that? And is
I
that
can agree
something?
on having a standardized QA program, but that's about as far as I can go with where we are in this process. We kind of need to know what our procedures are, what our hardware is going to be for allowing us to do the review process.
Right.
So those would be essential requirements, I guess, is what we're establishing here in order to have a standardized QA, and we would need to have identified standardized procedures at the dispatch level, and then the mechanism to review review the calls and review the performance in order to determine if it meets the whatever QA process we establish.
Yeah, and then the next thing would be once we got the policies and procedures, we need to start training everybody in the same policies and procedures.
Right. Yep.
Is it reasonable to assume that the vast majority of agencies who have no QA activities are like the much smaller dispatch centers who are like dispatching a small handful of agencies and are not PSAPs?
I think as far as the dispatch side of it, I think probably all of us are lacking in our QA programs.
It
I
says,
think Ron's question is important, and we can go back and identify based on what information was provided by MCP and provide you with who does training and who doesn't, instead of just here we've listed the summary of it, but we can give you a little bit more detail in the next session.
So where I was actually going with that is that I mean I don't think there's any secret that in my personal opinion, a dispatch center really should be a PSAP. I can't get behind even the minimal delays in transferring calls and things, but I think that we can reasonably and pushing any kind of standards out there is clearly going to get some pushback. But I have to take off my fire chief hat and put on my, taxpayer member of the public hat and say, are not the people of Vermont entitled to have some reasonable minimal expectations of what
Sure.
these dispatch centers are going to do as an extension of the 911 system, since that's what they really are. There's even if they're not answering the calls, they're still part of the 911 system, which does have standards.
Well, thanks for that, Ron. What
Which
you say
brings up
they
a
do,
good question. I'm sorry, Don. I just want to say it brings up a good question. Barb, the materials that you have, for the PSAPs for Q&A, could they be adopted? I mean, or could they be reviewed and adopted by, as part of this process? I mean, are they reasonably, could transfer to all call centers?
well, the call handling requirements that we have a PSAP standard, SOP, and it outlines various call handling requirements, but it's very much focused on call handling only. It doesn't outline any dispatch requirements. We stop at notification of the the agency or the agency's dispatcher is essentially where we stop. And so what happens beyond that, even how a dispatcher who's getting a call transferred into them from us, even how they interact with the call taker is outside our purview, right?
Mhm.
So we hand off the information, and in some cases, when the dispatcher says they have the call, we drop off. Or in other cases, the call taker might stay on, and that's typically for pre-arrival instructions or to support the dispatcher if it's like a fast-acting situation. So no, we would need to be looking at what are all the standards for dispatch activities, and I don't know. I'm not familiar with them.
So those would need to be developed, is
Yes.
what we're saying.
Yes.
So, and that's the document that is referenced here in under option 1.
Yeah, I put a link to that document in the
26.
notes.
Yeah.
I put
Is
a
this-
link. I put a link to that document in the meeting notes, in the chat.
This is for establishing the QA/QC program. But does it get into what the measure should be for dispatch activity?
You know,
Yes,
with
yes, I believe it does.
with 911, I have to answer the call in 10 seconds or less. I have to transfer the call in a specified amount of time. We don't have any procedures right now out there across the board in the state that says I have to dispatch that call out to my fire, EMS, or police in a specified period of time. There's nothing out there that tells me exactly what information I have to provide. So it's not easy to transfer the 911's call review process over to the dispatch side because it doesn't cover any of those elements. Because those elements don't even exist on our dispatch side, theoretically.
So the NENA standards that I put in the chat actually have there is they consider this process to be kind of individual trainer, a QA person based. And so individual call takers and dispatchers, there's questions and processes that they would follow. And it's well spelled out in there for law enforcement type calls, for fire, emergency medical, and kind of a script. Did they ask this question? Did you transfer this information? There is a fairly detailed process in there, including the kinds of materials that would be transferred. And we could summarize that for the group if they'd like to know what's in the NENA, so that we could be sure that it covers both call taking and dispatching.
Yes, I need to take some time to review that from that perspective, right? I'm familiar with it from the 911 side, but all right.
All right, we'll take it as an action item to provide a summary.
And if we are doing this work kind of incrementally, which is the only way I can really get my head around it. I mean, it might be that at some point the task force or whatever the successor group is can create the tools for these agencies to use rather than having to develop it from scratch, each one of them. I think that would be, well, that goes to the standardized QA, I guess, right? So to answer your question about priorities, Dom, I do agree that standardized QA is important, but there's a lot of work to be done in the lead up to that.
Agreed, understood. And I think some of the challenges I'm hearing here from the team are consistent with what is recorded here under the challenge section under option 1. You'll see it says is not developed for functions beyond call taking. That's currently true. There may be existing resource challenges to wide implementation. That's certainly going to be true. If we had I assume so, but let me ask the question: if there was a QA process for quality assurance of dispatch call handling, I assume there would be need for additional resources to perform the QA review. Is that true?
Yes, I would think so. Even from the 911 perspective, we've tossed around the idea of training the supervisors in each PSAP to conduct the QA. And even that, I mean, they're doing other jobs, right? So this gets to the other thing that's pointed out of the report, that QA often and training often follow as secondary duties for somebody who's got different primary responsibilities.
Yes.
And even with the 2 part-time people that we've been allowed to move forward with, that's just in an attempt to get our 911 call review levels, closer to the standard, which I forget the percentage now, but I think it's 2.5% or something. So yeah, human resources would be a challenge.
And the 4th bullet shown here, I think, Jim, that's something you brought up. It requires access to the dispatch center logging systems or CAD data.
Yes.
Right, which you're saying does not exist today, correct?
Right.
I'm
assuming if you develop a Q&A program as we go forward here, we're going to assume that we're going to consolidate. Before you force Woodstock to join Hartford, they're going to have to start implementing these things even before the physical consolidation occurs. Because I don't foresee Woodstock shutting down tomorrow and just moving into Hartford.
Right. It sounds like most of this discussion has been focused around the concept of option 1 as proposed here. Is there any discussion we should have about option 2 or option 3? Again, option 2 says using an external third-party QA service agreed upon by all stakeholders that is provided statewide.
Right. We have looked into that informally at the 911 board and decided to move forward with hiring the 2 spares, the 2 part-time people instead. Not to say we wouldn't look at it again, but at least from our perspective right now, it's better to have a Vermont person reviewing a Vermont call. That's how we're feeling at the moment. And it would not solve the problem of all these differing procedures and all of that around the state. And I think they've noted that in the challenges section.
Right.
Also, for option 2, there are additional costs that would be to a third party, where those, that investment internally would, as you say, Barb, that would dedicate some resources, QA/QC resources that, could be, leveraged statewide, dedicated staffing for a QA/QC policy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Jim, Ron, any other thoughts on what's described here for option 2?
Option 2, like I said, I don't, before it requires access to the systems and having the standardized procedure. If we can't do option 1, option 2 is completely off the table at this point. And I don't see that benefit of doing option 2 when we theoretically could have, whether it be the 911 or whoever, having the additional staff to actually do it internally.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Option 3 is described here is to create a formal codified statewide QA plan for call take dispatch and policy adherence using national standards. I'm not sure if I see how that differs too much from option one, other than it's I guess codified in legislation is what it sounds like would be a primary differentiator.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a thought on that. If without seeing what the written QA QC policies are of those that reported having a program, we can't determine whether or not there are elements of those existing plans that might be beneficial for Vermont, and whether or not a new plan based on NINA's standards, which I'm sure are robust and thorough, but they may not be specific to Vermont cases. So combination of option one and option three. Option three gives us the opportunity to leverage some of the option one benefits, but it also allows us to potentially use considerations that have been adopted to Vermont's particular case. And so it might be beneficial to see some of the better QA policies out there, because it assumes that the AT reported having some sort of QA program. I don't know what that means. Is that means that they're an A or they're all a C, or what are they? But I'm a little without knowing what they are. I wouldn't want to. I don't think it'd be prudent for us to go ahead and discount them without giving some consideration. I don't know what you think about that.
I think it would be good to see those that have the formal standards-based program to see what it actually looks like. And 3 reported informal programs. It'd be good to see what they're measuring, right?
Right.
It might. And I guess I don't know what we could. Maybe we need to talk to the 13 that that do the reactive QA, because wouldn't they still have to measure it against something, right? So I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at now, is it'd be good to know what is being measured now.
What's the criteria?
Yeah. And in the future, if this thing is a truly a statewide, standardized program, then there'll have to be agreement among everyone about what we're measuring and how, and determinations made actually about what can be a local decision, at the time of the incident, and what has to happen in the statewide system.
Well, I think that part of this whole issue of having a QA program that's not like, I mean, at some point you have to kind of take the term reactive QA program, and that is turned into fixing the problems that happen after they occur. So if you look at the whole idea of having a proactive QA program that's looking at what's going on and comparing things to the training and the standards and stuff, that takes people and it takes money to do. And I think at the moment, all of our dispatchers, all of our communication centers are short-staffed, and even if they could get the people, assigning them to doing this would cost money that they don't really have at the moment. So
Right.
we also need to, if we're going to tell people that they need to have a QA program and all that kind of stuff, then we also have to tell them where they're getting the money to implement it.
Yes.
Sure. Any other thoughts or discussion on standardized QA?
So I encourage you to just skim, the APCO NINA standards. I mean, we'll provide a summary and share with the test, with the working group. of it. But I mean, there are, it is very thorough. But I would also like to see, if I could, Barb, can you share a copy of what your E911 has, or a link to it, anything that's on the
Yes. Yep.
and we will also, these are action items, Elizabeth, and we will also look through the report and the inventory report and determine whether or not there's more detail regarding who has a plan that might be worth evaluating. And if we can't find that, we'll also just ask Jason to share some of that insight. But having a copy of some of those other written documents might be good to see, and we can assess them if you all think it's worth, if that's worth something, that we could provide back to you as additional insight and guidance.
That sounds good to me. And I will get a link to our call handling requirements and to our call review, like our QA criteria, right? You're looking for both?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Great, thanks, Rick. I did want to go over the action items for this before we move on. So I heard at least 3 there. Elizabeth, I guess you got those captured?
I have recorded that Barb will provide a link to the call handling requirements and QA criteria, and Televate will look through the report to find out who has a plan worth evaluating.
And we'll also review the reference document here from APCO Nina on the
Right, yes.
standard. Yep. And
And
provide
provide
a
a
summary.
summary, yes.
Great. Anything else from the group, or do we want to move on to the next item?
It sounds to me like we've kind of pushed option 2 to the bottom right now, right? And there's a lot of
That's it.
foundational work that needs to be done. Maybe that would come into the picture later on once that foundation is laid, or we'll make a determination about option 1 or 3. They seem very similar to me. 3 would definitely be the end goal.
I think that's a good summary, Barb. That's
Yep.
kind of what I
Okay.
heard as well. Thank you.
All right.
The next item is support and administrative roles.
Yep, Don, before you get started, can I ask Jim a question? Hey, Jim, does your center have written QA, QC policies?
No,
No, okay.
we're more reactive.
All right. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I was hoping that you could share a document with me that you're. So
No, I'm
not.
actually been hoping that I'd get something out of this.
I like that thought. Yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, other than what I've used for reviewing some of the calls, the 911 stuff, call review, no. When I
Right.
review a call, it's reacting to something, and I'm looking at it based on our policies and procedures that are in play.
Thank you for that, sir.
Okay, this next item is support and administrative roles, and it discusses potential either reliance on local government for available staff to perform support functions like HR, QA. We've been discussing report administration, clerical work, and those duties often fall on an employee with other primary duties. So they've discussed various options to improve that situation. These options include option 1 is to have a statewide committee develop a list of necessary support positions. Individual communication center handles, but individual comp centers handle all the hiring. Option 2 would be a statewide committee identifies those positions similar to option 1 and writes job descriptions, develops salary structures so it's more uniform throughout the state. And then option 3 would be having more of a centralized group to share support roles like HR, administrative, and do that regionally as opposed to being addressed individually by each communication center. So thoughts there. I guess right now they're saying it's primarily done individually at the comm centers, and sometimes that limits the resources available for these types of functions.
My very first thought is these agencies, independent agencies, right, are not going to want any other entity involved in their hiring, but and their, I think performance management was in here somewhere too, or so maybe I'm missing what the goal is with the HR piece in particular. I mean, you've got the state of Vermont has its HR machine, right, that works with Williston and Westminster, of course, and separately with the 911 board for our HR stuff. Are they suggesting that we share, that the state share those HR roles? I mean, I think that's way beyond our purview. I don't know. I guess I'm a little lost on this one.
I think that's one of the options, or that would be option 3, right? Or at least have it done at a regional level.
I think in general, consideration that call taker dispatchers have other administrative responsibilities at various centers is important to understand. And so when you say that, well, how does that limit their ability to do their job at a given dispatch, at a dispatch center? And does it affect them? And so, we're assuming that it does, but that did we receive feedback from the dispatcher saying that it does impact them? So I think it's important to figure out at local level what they do, but is what they're doing beyond, some of those administrative tasks like answering, going to the front desk to answer a walk-in citizens call, or opening doors, closing doors administratively, whatever their administration is. There's a whole list of them in the report. Is that impacting their ability to do their job? And if so, at least making sure that their centers are aware of that if they aren't. But those centers then, if would then have to find someone else to do the job. So in a regionalization, if we regionalize and have fewer dispatch centers, those local communities are going to have to determine who in their staff is going to handle some of those administrative roles that these folks were doing. And so, it's going to be unique at each one, though. I don't think there's any, there is a list of activities, but we didn't indicate it by dispatch center that I know of. So I think it's going to be unique. Developing a policy to tell, that states that, it's going to be challenging, because I think it's really locally controlled, locally determined and locally controlled.
I think this is going to end up depending on how ultimately we build out the system. Am I going to be a employee of, say, the town of Shelburne, or worst case, best case scenario, however you want to look at it? At some point, we decide that all of the dispatch call taking facilities are going to be state operated. So would I be a state employee at that point? So not knowing how that's going to pan out, I'm assuming we're probably going to be still foreseeable future going down the path that we're currently in, where I'm a Shelburne employee. I have HR staff that does HR work. I don't do any of that stuff. But I know some of the smaller facilities, and in the past, I was digging through the applications, scheduling the meetings and so forth, but I don't do those things anymore.
I'm just follow up on comment you just made, Jim. You said if regionalization results in state employees. So we're saying that regardless of what the final regionalization is.
We're having some audio difficulties.
That's one of the
there,
considerations that could occur.
Well,
Sorry?
I think potentially there's an option out there where we can say we consolidate down to the 6 PSAPs. As we're going forward, we say it's just easier to manage it all under one umbrella, under the governance model. You know, they say under governance, we're going to have the governance be the state for everything. Then do I become a state employee? So then all of this is ultimately managed under the state. I don't necessarily see that happening anytime soon, but that is ultimately potentially one option out there, depending on what the governance model does, committee does.
Right.
Understood.
But I see there's a lot of small agencies that are going to have to consolidate at some point. And then right now, those dispatch supervisors are doing the HR work to a certain extent.
And what's the goal here? What's the priority? Is the priority to relieve dispatch operators of and managers of these types of activities to allow them to focus on their primary role? Is that what we would want to do here?
I would say yes. Where is that HR person going to be? I don't know. We have added HR at the town of Shelburne, which has taken a bunch of stuff off my plate.
Yes.
So ultimately, those other agencies, I don't know how St. Albans is. I'm assuming that they have somebody doing their HR work, but I don't know that for a fact. I know some of the smaller agencies, I can guarantee some of that HR work is being done right in the dispatch center.
Does the report outline, I'm not remembering, does it outline the types of activities, and do we already have the information on who does what of these extra activities? Or would we need to go out to them and ask?
We have a global listing of some of them, but
Right.
I'd have to go back. We'll have to go back and check the inventory report.
Yeah, I think it was in the inventory report.
I think
Okay.
it was. Yeah, well,
Right.
we'll check it. Make that another action item, Elizabeth. Please.
Because we do need feedback from them too about, you know, whether it is impacting their ability to do their primary job. And we need that feedback from the people in the chairs, not their bosses, right? Who might feel that it has no impact. And
Right.
that might feel very different when you're sitting in the chair. So,
Yes. Any other discussion on this? I'm getting a feeling not too much more we can discuss or identify in this one until we get some more information.
yeah.
I would. I don't disagree. I would say though that one of the potential follow-ons here is maybe to talk to some of the, you know, after we looked at the inventory report to see if it makes sense to talk to a few dispatchers that had indicated a concern.
Right.
You know, I don't know the answer to that yet, but that way we could follow up directly on behalf of the working group to see what, you know, what a given or a few given dispatchers think about this additional administrative role that they may have.
I agree.
Sense.
So, Elizabeth, we've got some action items captured for this item.
Yes.
All right, great. Thanks. Any other comments, or should we move on?
I think we can move on.
Thank you. Moving on. And GIS is next. So I think many of you know the state today provides what's described as robust and well-maintained GIS mapping service to all PSAPs, dispatch centers, and response agencies can access. And it was highlighted as a priority resource, apparently from the interviews. And resulting from that, MCP has identified a couple of potential options for further enhancement. Well, option one is essentially continuing the status quo, continue to use existing system with the existing staff structure. I think that just goes to prove that it's well regarded. Option two would be an enhancement, which would enhance the state GIS data by incorporating regional or municipal data not currently included. And that's under the strengths, I guess they're identifying what that could potentially include. Special hazards, helipad, landing zones, hazardous material storage locations, etc. What's the group's thought on this discussion? First of all, I guess for the three of you, are you in agreement that what's provided today is a well-maintained, robust GIS service?
Yes.
Oops, did we lose Ron? I think we lost Ron. I would definitely agree with that since it's maintained by our office. So I do think they do a very good job of keeping the information accurate and up to date and available, of course, to PSAPs and through the VCGI open portal. We have incorporated some local GIS layers, and the option two does say that are not already incorporated, but we have hydrants and I don't know what else, many other things in there that one might consider local. Yeah. And we're open to the discussion to add more. Where the trick comes in is that delineation. Right now, we are not able to even expend funds on activities specific to dispatch, right? Though there was a change in the wording of the law that if the board deems that this is a important tool or important project to demo, then there's a little bit more flexibility. I'll have to go back and look at the language around that. As to whether or not we could do that, but we would also want to, there need to be rules in place, right, for how we get that information, how it's kept updated, and so on. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, but.
While you're rambling, I was came to my mind thinking about it, that what data sets, have we determined what data sets are relevant, to include into the GIS? Have the locals provided, I'd like to have this information in there. I'd like to have this information in there. They can't, and I'm assuming they can't make edits without the E911 board, of course. And if you get an avalanche of requests, then you can't handle, E911 board can't handle those requests. So
it could become a resource issue. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, we standardize on what data, additional GIS elements would be beneficial to have that locals could either provide that could be incorporated or not. But, if everyone has something different, that's certainly locally based, and they might need their own, GIS tool I don't think they can add to your GIS data, can they? Could they create their own data sets that they could access?
there would have to be conversations around that with our GIS team. I don't know if they can't simply add something right now. I mean, they would have to
Yeah,
come through us. So
I don't know any database administrator that wants to open it up to others and run the risk that they could potentially, sabotage something that's key in the data
Right.
already. So it's not
right,
without a process, a procedure, an approval. Normally, there are rights management in every database, so I don't think that's going to work. But I mean, if Jim says, I could benefit having in my access to this data, and there's common agreement across the state that this is the key data,
Yep.
then you would need to make an investment. Not only at the local level, they would have to invest to create that data or to provide that data. Then you'd have to integrate it in. So, and to get that way, we'd have to determine what data, who owns the data, then who delivers the data and who enters the data, and then who has access rights. Because if I give you something local, does that mean that everyone can have access to it? So there's a whole lot. There's a process on data and data rights management that would have to be developed. So I see a benefit. It could be done, but it can't be done at the snap of the finger, and it can't be done just by talking about it. You'd have to have a group decision,
like a user group or
an
something.
effort.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be supports a user group.
Is there a process right now for a local agency to request additional data? How is that done if they have a specific data set that they would like to see?
In the past, I provided a lot of the points, coves, and bays along Lake Champlain after a boating incident that we had. At that time, 911 didn't have that data in there. And I kept getting asked where I was getting my information from, and I pointed to the lake chart book and said, this is my source of data, because that's what boaters would have. And slowly, all that data has been put into the system. So I've had times when I've asked for stuff to be put in, and it's been put in.
Yep, I think we work with individual groups even. I mean, we've got trail data in there, so we've worked with the ski areas. What's the other one, Jim? Vast trails, the snowmobile trails,
the hiking trails.
Hiking trails. We've worked with Border Patrol most recently to enter information about signs they have along the border for getting people connected with help should they be out in the woods and need it. So they come to us and initiate a conversation, but there's no like posted procedure somewhere that says, hey, if you want your data added, do this, this, and this. So we would encourage them to come to us and talk about it. And as part of this conversation, if the task force were able to determine that there's this additional data that could benefit everyone, we would certainly be open to the conversation, recognizing we could have resource impacts as well.
Great, thank you.
So with that said, what are your thoughts on how best to tackle this challenge here of potentially, providing more local data, and what data sets should be considered? I heard a working group mentioned.
I think we would need to ask the dispatch center, the communication centers, what information do you have that's not already provided? I mean, we could provide a list of what data sets we do have, if that's helpful.
I would imagine that would be helpful, yes.
All right.
Yeah, the only thing I see on this list here was the hazardous material storage. I'm assuming that they're referencing tier 3 sites. That's not necessarily in the 911 data. Um, so, but then you get into who's going to be managing it. Is it going to be updated in a timely fashion? Because some of those sites that are a tier 3 site today, 5 years from now, may not be a tier 3 site.
Right. We're always concerned, of course, about how the information is maintained and updated. And there would need to be policies and procedures around that as well.
Yeah, I think you're both right. I mean, the what data, how that data gets added. I mean, I think it's worth going to find out, but there will be an investment required. So this could be one of the potential recommendations or priority recommendations. But one of the things that we have discussed, Dom and I, prior to the session is what role does any of these working groups have in quantifying, here's what could be considered, but do we need to recommend, how it would be done and the potential cost for that? So this is just one example. All right.
Right.
So we want to solicit input from the dispatch centers as to what data should be included. I think that's a fairly easy survey that we could put out. And then when we have the survey data, then we could see the scope of that effort and then potentially say, potentially quantify benefits and potential costs to achieve it. Now, we definitely have a working group that's focused on, we're going to be looking at funding. There is the funding and cost sharing group, but I don't think if they don't know what we're thinking about, how could they look at what the funding is? So, if some of the the working groups recommend a consideration, then how does it get eventually? It'll have to get prioritized, and there'll have to be a dollar value associated to it of some sort. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Is that part of this working group's consideration that we would identify a potential consideration for the overall task force to take, and if so, should we put a rough order of magnitude value in doing that and benefits of?
I think we should do all of the above. So,
Okay. All right. Well, that's an action item for us to consider. All right.
On the other issue of, the board's authority to support dispatch functions, the language that's there could probably address, additional data coming in as I think about it. But as part of the governance discussion, there could be a statute change, that expands the authority of the board for these kinds of activities, right? So maybe just to clarify that, or it could just go to whatever group, whatever entity, if there is a statewide entity that's going to oversee this. So.
Okay, we have the necessary action items recorded for this item.
What I have noted is that Barb intended to provide a list of data sets that were available.
Yes.
I think another global working action item is for us to quantify benefits and rough order of magnitude costs for prioritized recommendations that this group would offer up to the working group.
Yes, good.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Well, that addresses the 3 items under support that we said we wanted to address today. I'm gonna stop sharing here.
So I'm going back to my agenda here to see what is next on the agenda. So we've done the objectives, we've done the discussion, and so next steps is the next item. I mean, we've identified, it sounds like all those action items.
Yes.
But what else do we have to be thinking about for next steps, Dawn or Rick or?
A couple of things. One, we've got to come to agreement on a schedule for these. We know that the department, the DPS has got a responsibility of posting, and we know that Televate is going to, we've created a global agendas, so that therefore they're broad, and we don't need to create a new agenda for every meeting. But Dan was hoping that we could publish anticipated meeting dates. And I think the best way to get to that is to agree to some kind of cadence. So we met today. Can we agree to meet a week from now for the second meeting, or 2 weeks from now? And if we could agree to a day and a time, then we could at least know this working group's scheduled meetings, and they may change, of course, but I'd highly recommend that we try to get a cadence on a day and a time that works for everyone, as much as we can today. Of course, it would be helpful to have Ron here, to help with that. But Ron has left the building. So
I don't know what happened there, but I mean, I would just throw out, how many meetings do you think that we will need? Like 3 more, or?
I would think 3 more. Yeah, I don't know what you think, but I was thinking that.
That's what I thought.
Well, I was thinking the way we divided it up, there's three groups, and we addressed one of the 3 groups today. So at the next meeting, we'd like to address the second of the 3 groups, but we also have action items to review from this. So it's going to be a bit more involved. So 3 more, 3 more might be enough. It's going to be, it'll just take 2 more to get through those other groups. So we're definitely going to need at least one additional meeting.
Well, I would suggest that we try the same time frame for the next, whatever it would be, 3 weeks, right? Mondays at noon. But Jim, how does that work for you?
That works for me.
Right.
The 21st or 28th, 14th, what are we?
All of the above.
All of the above. So the 14th, 21st, and 28th. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
you're saying the 14th, the 21st, and the 28th?
Yeah.
Works for me.
So Dom, you were going to add the approval of the agenda to the agenda, and then will you guys will get all this information to Emily, right? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So here's how we'll do it. Elizabeth has taken notes. She will send those notes to Dom and I. We will we'll review, make any inputs, edits, and then Dom will forward the final notes to Emily, along with the schedule for the next sessions, so that they get posted. I think we also have to post.
And I will actually, excuse me for interrupting, and I'll actually send out the meeting notices as well.
Okay.
And then, I have to establish the meeting notice and then have the link information that I can provide to Emily so she can post that.
Okay. And you will send Emily the recording of this meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm assuming you also have to provide the presentation as well, Don?
I assume we would if, well, we can. I would assume we would if that's requested, if there's a request for that. I guess I'm not sure how that works. Do I need to, or just, do we assume that that has to be provided since we reviewed it in this meeting, or do we just provide that if there's a public records request? That's my question.
You go.
Well, there's nothing in it that wouldn't be released in a public records request that I saw. So
No, nothing sensitive.
I don't have a problem providing that to Emily and asking her to post it as well. Jim?
Okay.
No, I don't have a problem either.
Okay. All right.
I'll also note that some of the notes that I took will make the most sense in the context of being able to review the associated slide.
Okay.
So as we're discussing, what's on slide 6, for example, which I believe was QA/QC, it'll be a lot easier to also be able to read that text in conjunction with following along with the notes. It is visible on screen, so anyone who who actually watches the meeting will see them, but just to make it a little easier, I think having the slide on hand is probably better.
Okay.
Good point.
That makes good sense. All right. We've got our meeting scheduled. We know what we're doing for next steps, right? And there's no one here, I'm double checking, to offer public comment to. I don't know how to adjourn a working group like this without a quorum. We can't have a vote because we don't have a quorum. So we just agree to adjourn.
Sounds good to me.
That is how we're going to handle it today. And I will double check with my public meeting law people to see if we need to fine tune that. But I think if we're all in agreement, we can part ways.
Thank you all.
All right. Thank
Hey,
you.
Thank you.
This was a good discussion.
Really,
yes.
We covered really good ground. So thank you.
Agreed. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
See you guys. Have a good one.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.